Hi, welcome to Why Like Ike, except this doesn't look like Mr. Ike, it looks like Mrs. Ike.
Absolutely.
So my special guest of Why Like Ike today, my friend William, Mr. Snyder.
Hi, Dennis.
How are you?
Nice to see you again, sir.
Blue nitrile gloves
Blue
on, that
gloves.
means you do all the touching and I don't.
Okay, but you got your white gloves
I have
on, so
white
we're
just
okay.
in case I make a mistake. So we obviously have Mamie on display today.
Right. Well, for November, we wanted, since it's her birthday, it's her 121st birthday this month, we wanted to talk a little bit about why like Mamie.
You know, I know a little about Mamie.
Okay.
So let me start off with what I know that I feel the most passionately about.
Okay.
She was Dwight David Eisenhower's partner
Absolutely.
in life, and that credit came from him.
It did very much. I don't think, and many people agree, that Ike wouldn't have made it as far as he did without Mamie. She was very much his partner throughout their entire married life and throughout his military career. And what's really interesting is that as a officer in the military, as his rank increases, so does that of his wife, provided she's a good partner and helps promote the partnership along.
That's not an easy trail for any, the military wife as a career wife, if you will, is not an easy trail for anybody. So it wasn't easy for Mamie Eisenhower.
No, it really wasn't, and she was well trained for it because she grew up in a wealthy family, and she went to finishing school, as the society ladies did in those days. So she was well trained for being, you know, a socialite, a social wife, but she ended up falling in love with a poor military man from the wrong side of the tracks in Abilene, Kansas.
Right.
And they made a partnership of opposites, and it worked out for them and went very well.
There has to be a lot of stories in the hats alone.
Definitely.
We know that Mrs. Eisenhower was far more than the First Lady of Fashion, but
That's right.
she was the First Lady of Fashion as well.
Well said. That's a great way to put it. She made the 10 best dressed list every year she was First Lady. Kind of a big deal in the 1950s, of course.
Big deal.
But she really did set the fashion trends. And there's some interesting cartoons like the one that's on the table here where someone who sells hats, as a matter of fact, is saying how nice it is to have something pleasant to look at for a change. So Mamie was well recognized as, you know, certainly pretty to look at, but also a lot more to her. She had did a lot for various charities. She did a great job running the White House. She balanced the White House budget every year she was First Lady. Her husband only did it 3 times, but he had a slightly more complicated budget to work with.
That's good. Now that's a good one. I think that's funny. We know a little bit about Mamie and about her charitable work.
Yes.
That I don't suppose that was probably publicized very much during the years that she was doing this, the way things are today. Something happens today, you see it 100 times before you get home on your smartphone. Not so much then.
She actually donated to many charities, and frequently she would donate anonymously. And because she felt passionately about that and gave at least a little bit of money. She didn't necessarily give a lot, but she felt she gave what she could. But other charities she gave to a lot, and that was for children's health particularly, but in general, the American Heart Association was one that was very dear to her. Both she and Ike had heart troubles, and one of the awards we have up here, which I'll go ahead and open, if I can move a hat, if we can find room on the table. She received the Volunteer of the Year Award in 1970 from the American Heart Association, and it was presented to her by Pat Nixon, who at the time was First Lady.
That would have been just after the president had passed away.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So I think it was a rather fitting tribute to Mamie and all of her hard work with the Heart Association. So you said things about the hats. Of course, hats were an important accessory. We actually have, and you asked, we had to go look this up, but we have 112 of Mamie's hats in the collection. That's not all of her hats, I'm sure, but that she had throughout her life, but that's how many we have. And one of her favorite designers, represented by almost half the hats, was a woman named Sally Victor.
Okay.
And she was a milliner in New York. She actually started as a part-time clerk in Macy's and then rose to be their head hat buyer. And then when she married, her husband was a milliner. She took over his business, and it grew by leaps and bounds. She designed hats for many first ladies. And she also designed this blue hat right here that was sold in department stores across the country. It's a Like Ike hat I Like Ike hat, excuse me, for the 1952 election, and it was sponsored by the Republican National Committee. So partially thanks to Mamie's patronage, but movie stars, lots of people love Sally, and actually later in the 1960s, she was credited with saving the Ecuadorian economy by promoting straw hats.
You told me that before the cameras come on, and I find that funny, but fascinating, and what a great point.
Yes.
We're in Abilene, Kansas, and everything when the camera's pointed at me, I'm thinking about how this is good for us as a community. Well, why Like Ike? Ike has been tremendous for Abilene, but he also said Abilene was tremendous for him.
That's right.
So
That's
it's
right.
a partnership, but you think about economic development, sole person to save the economy of a South American, Central American country with straw hats. The power of the bully pulpit gets laid to the president quite often.
It does.
I don't think I've ever heard saving a country laid at the head of a first lady
I'm a
before.
first lady and a hat maker, and that's actually one of Sally's straw hats right there under one of her I Like Ike hats.
That is a very cool hat.
It's a very cool hat, and it was just remarkable that, we might think of, fashion like this as frivolous, but it really wasn't. And Mamie promoted many female designers, many female hat makers, and here we have a female hat maker who employed almost entirely women in her hat making business. And again, as you just mentioned, saving an economy of another country.
With all of these lovely things setting in front of us, can we follow that line a little bit?
Sure.
I'll go and you chase me and drag me back if I need dragged back.
Sure.
So we know a lot about the Eisenhower administration. We know about 8 years of peace and prosperity. We know about NASA. We know about the interstate highway system. We know about the launching of the connectivity between universities that turned into the internet. So, but here today, I'm learning from listening to you and thinking about this, that Mrs. Eisenhower, her milliner, was given credit for saving the economy of Guatemala?
Ecuador.
And so we're also living through the time that the World War II workforce of women, because they had to be there to sustain the war effort, then turned into the workforce of commercial America.
That's right.
They just didn't turn around and go back home.
No.
They kept working. They formed businesses.
That's right.
They grew businesses. They took over businesses. I never thought about it this way. So here we're sitting with these displays of America as it changed to a workforce of multiple genders working together at the same levels of jobs.
Absolutely. I think you couldn't have said it better. So many times we think of the 1950s sort of returning to that nuclear family ideal, and Rosie the Riveter of World War II is now a homemaker. That wasn't entirely the case. There was a great deal of diversity in the workforce following World War II, and it continued right through the 50s, even though we don't necessarily think about it.
We should get one of the researchers to do a little work for us and for a follow-up on that. I'll bet you there's some good information about the workforce changes that these hats have sparked in our ideas today.
Yes, and not just hats. We have some pretty jewelry here and some nice bling. But interestingly, although she really liked very nice things, she shopped at fancy department stores. She did have designers that she went to for special occasions. But one of her granddaughters also told me that she loved to shop at Jacques Penney, or J.C. Penney's, as we might call it today. But Mamie always said Jacques Penney. And how her grandmother could wear, diamond earrings and a pearl necklace, but dime store bracelets. And I think the ones we have out here with her initials on it that spell out me, but they're actually metal-coated plastics from the 1960s. And they're just really, inexpensive little bracelets.
I took pictures of those and sent them to, I sent them to all the girls, but I intended our middle daughter, who my son would, when he was tiny, started calling her Mamie. So you had them arranged there, and I just took a picture.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we could make a family connection, another
we spread
connection.
the goodwill all across America today.
And another neat piece, of course, charm bracelets were very popular at the time. And if you look closely, those are actually photographs of her 4 grandchildren.
Right, that's very cool.
Yeah, she wore that quite frequently. This is a lovely set of Trifari jewelry, who, by the way, were also the designers for her jewelry that she wore to both of the inaugural balls, both in 52 and 53 and 57. But this particular one was sent to her on her birthday as a birthday present in 1952, so right after the election. And it was sent to her by the Eisenhower Press Radio and Photographer Corps. So
that's very cool.
It's a really,
that's the actual telegram.
That's the actual telegram.
We'll
and
get
it even
a close-up of that.
It came as a birthday card to her. So I think that's neat that she's already, sort of making that sort of connections to the press.
We always, when we're on Like Ike and we don't normally have Mamie stuff, we're always talking about relevancy of the Eisenhower war years, the Eisenhower presidency. His life in general. And so we talk about that all the time. Well, I'm struck today by the relevancy of Mamie Eisenhower in one thing you have displayed. That dress right there?
Yes.
My wife would love that dress today. Samantha would love that dress today.
Yes,
that's why we have our eye on her. So, but, talk about some timeless things. That's timeless.
Absolutely.
That dress will never be something that somebody wouldn't want to wear.
Exactly. And what's kind of interesting, I'm glad you picked out that dress and we have a chance to talk about it. When the Eisenhowers moved, and you talk about relevancy today, when they moved into the White House, it had just undergone 4 years of renovation under the Truman administration. And it had been sort of redecorated in the style of what would have been, the early years of the White House, but it was all reproduction furniture.
Okay.
Mamie asked the staff, well, where are all the antiques? And they essentially didn't have any. And she thought that was unfortunate, and so she immediately started a campaign to track down where all the original White House furniture was and have it donated back. It couldn't be purchased, it would have to be donated back. And she was very successful in getting that started. Not only did she create the White House collection that we have today, in terms of furniture and some of the original artwork, she also finished the collection of the White House china.
And that's that dress.
And that is that dress. And she is in the china room where one piece of every president's china is on display, one place setting.
Yeah.
And Mamie completed that. And so, again, it may seem frivolous, but it really isn't. The White House had lost a lot of its history, and Mamie brought it, or started at least, to bring it all back.
So we're sitting here in the Eisenhower Presidential Library Museum and Boyhood Home, and actually in the museum building itself to film this show. We certainly would never say preservation of history would be anything other than a critical thing for our country.
Absolutely.
I'd never heard that story, that Mamie Eisenhower was the one who reached back into history and started the process to bring that history back into our house, the White House.
Yes, and
it's a great story.
And that's why she wanted to do it. It wasn't so much for her. She felt it needed to be preserved for the American people. As many presidents have called it and first ladies have called it, it is the people's house.
Yeah, I would agree. That's great. I always learn something when we film a show. That was it today. Well, there was actually a lot today, but that was the big one for me.
Do we have time for a slightly funny story about the White House?
Yes, we do.
Well, again, there wasn't any money for the Eisenhowers to redecorate the White House when they moved in after the renovations that had undergone in the Truman administration. So the Truman's daughter, Margaret, had lived with them in the White House, and she had her own sitting room.
All right.
So when the Eisenhowers moved in and Mamie said, no, Ike and I will not sleep in separate bedrooms. The president and we slept apart for too many years. We will sleep in one bedroom. She created a master bedroom in the White House, but she didn't have any money for the bedclothes. So she reused Margaret Truman's drapes to make the bedspread for the new bed.
What a fantastic story.
That was the one piece of furniture she was allowed to buy.
Scarlett O'Hara of the White House, right?
That or the Carol Burnett episode that I always think of.
Okay.
But yes, she was a frugal, military housewife, but she also did it in the White House because she had to.
That's great. That is a great story. Great story. Okay, so there the award that's up there that we briefly mentioned.
Yes.
Mamie Eisenhower lived until 1979.
Correct.
So her years between her husband passing away in 1979, do we have some insight into what was important to her in those years?
Absolutely. She continued to work on health care issues, both specifically heart health care and, again, children's health care, but also rather following in her husband's footsteps, and it was something that was dear to her too, was veterans' health and welfare. And for her 75th birthday, she was awarded this, which is the Military Wife of the Century.
I love that title.
So, yeah, isn't that a great title?
Of the century.
So, yes, of the century. So, nobody could top Mamie in the 20th century. So, but again, not for any particular political reasons, but because she cared and she worked hard.
What a tremendous burden military wives carry, and having already established many times in our programming here about who Dwight David Eisenhower was in the military, it's easy to also say, what a greater burden was carried by a military wife. Probably not many that carried more than she did. Those decisions come home.
Yes, they do.
That pressure comes home.
They do. And that's what Mamie tried to do for Ike and their son John, and then for their grandchildren, was always to have, no matter where his career took them, there was always a private family home that was welcoming, that was warm, where they could all come and be together.
So I've got another idea for you.
Okay.
When Dwight David Eisenhower was at Camp Colt,
yes,
pretending trucks were tanks.
That's right.
When he came home at night, was not the happiest moments of his life. I have to say that you think about that. His job was to train a cavalry force on tanks, and had one.
And one.
And
finally,
that was only at the end.
Exactly.
That was only at the end. The rest of the time, so he couldn't have came home happy every day. So here's what your job is, should you choose to accept it.
Samantha, remember this.
Okay.
So I can...
You have to come up with outfits of Mamie's that were those years. You got to tie those years, not necessarily exactly the
dear.
Camp Colt. What,
okay.
Is that not interesting?
That
Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be fun.
To go, because you do think back, they did dress a little in that evening times in those days. So it would be fun to put some years together with Mamie's outfits and go, this is Camp Colt time. That's what made me think of it. That had to be not a fun job.
Not a fun job, and certainly I think he was living in a tent at the time for a while too. It wasn't even a barrack situation there.
Had to be not fun.
Yes, so we do have some really early clothes of Mamie's, but I don't know that we've got anything that far back. But
if we do, we do. If we don't, we don't. But we have to try.
That's right. We'll try.
That's what
and
we do here.
That's
we
right.
tell the stories.
We'll tell the story. We'll call the Gettysburg Farm and see if they have anything that old, and we'll see if we can borrow it.
Okay, you only brought one pair of shoes, but they are cute shoes.
They are cute shoes, and there's a reason why I only brought one. Almost all of we have more shoes than hats, and I said we had 121 hats. We have more
112.
shoes. 112, sorry. We'll switch the numbers around there. We have more shoes, and I don't remember how many, but they're almost all exactly like that. That was Mamie's. That is Mamie's favorite shoe. And of course, we have some really fun and funky wedges from the 1970s that are,
very cool.
Despite the fact that she was 80 years old, she was wearing very stylish shoes right up till the end. But she had little 2-inch pumps in almost every color, every pattern. If she had a dress made, she'd have matching shoes made. But of course, everything went together.
Bang, boom.
Yes, yes, quite a lovely outfit. I wanted to bring that one out for sure.
So I have to congratulate you. We've made it right at 25 minutes.
Okay.
With me and fashion.
And Mamie.
Well, Mamie,
so thank you.
But fashion. And I don't think I even looked stupid, did I?
No, not at all.
Okay.
You did a great job. Thank you, Dennis, as always.
This has been a winner. It was a lot of fun, William. Thank you
you
for putting this together.
My pleasure.
There's at least 51% of the population that said, finally, they made a show for me.
Okay.
All right. All right.
We're happy we could do that.
We're ecstatic we could do that. You need to come to the Eisenhower Library, Museum, Boyhood Home. You can experience some of these things yourself right there in the glass in front of you. So it's a terrific opportunity. We're glad we got a chance to make the show Why Like Ike for you today. William Snyder, he's the curator here. He does a great job. I'm Dennis Weiss. I work for Eagle Communications. You have a great day.